10 Things to Know about the Islamic Republic of Iran. The modern-day Islamic Republic of Iran was founded during the 1979 revolution, which was a massive uprising of the middle class against the then Shah who was in power. It led to an acquisition of power by the country's first Ayatollah, Ayatollah Khomeini, who established a very unitary and centralized state, which remains to this day. The modern-day constitution of Iran was drafted by the Assembly of Religious Experts, a large number of Shiite clerics who infused Islam into the backbone of the state. It was widely approved by the people at that time by public referendum. Khomeini was named the country's first supreme leader, and the basis of the constitution was centered around the idea of jurist guardianship, that clerics know what is best for the Iranian people, and thus should have the authority over the entire community. Thus, since the 1979 revolution and the establishment of the constitution, the concept of political Islam or Islamism has been embedded into Iranian politics. This deals with the idea that the Quran and its scripture has been fused into many of the practices of the state. A massive division still exists today between religious fundamentalists and reformers. The majority of the world's Shiite Muslims do reside within the borders of Iran, creating a tension between theocracy and democracy. A theocracy is a government structure in which the clergy play a very active role in making policy and are believed to be divinely guided. While Iran does hold open elections for their legislature, for their president, and even for the Assembly of Religious Experts, all of the candidates are vetted and controlled by the dominant Guardian Council, and ultimately is the supreme leader and the clerics who hold most of the power within the country. Ayatollah Khomeini even established an expediency council of 34 members, most of which being clerics, who help decide if legislation is consistent with Shia Muslim beliefs. There are essentially two executives atop the Iranian government structure, with one, the supreme leader, being far more powerful. The supreme leader is the dominant figure of Iranian politics, as he is selected by the Assembly of Religious Experts and serves a non-specified term length and can only be removed by the Assembly of Experts if they believe he's unable to fulfill his responsibilities. Some of his powers include being the commander-in-chief of the military, appointing federal judges including the chief judge, and appointing half of the powerful Guardian Council. He also can propose legislation and veto or reject any laws that get through the Majlis. The president of Iran is popularly elected by the people to two possible consecutive 4-year terms. He's elected by either simple majority, plurality, or if necessary, a runoff or 2-round system. His powers include signing and negotiating treaties, chairing the National Security Council, proposing laws, and drawing up an annual budget. The supreme leader is given the constitutional authority to remove the president. The dominance of Islam and theocracy in Iranian politics is best characterized by their dominant political institution, that of the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council consists of 12 members, all high-ranking clerics, half appointed by the supreme leader and the other half by the chief judge. The Guardian Council holds much power within the Iranian system, as they are able to vet and control all candidates who run for public office within the country, ensuring that these people are devout, pious Shia Muslims who will uphold legislation through the lens of the clerics. They are given the authority to block any piece of legislation that is passed by the Majlis, and meet very secretively with a total lack of transparency. The popularly elected chamber of the Iranian legislature is known as the Majlis. It has 290 members, some elected by majority or plurality election and others by proportional representation. The Majlis is given powers such as enacting legislation, approving budgets, investigating governmental affairs, and ousting cabinet members through a vote of no confidence. This does not apply, however, to the president, who can only be removed by the supreme leader. Ultimately, their power is still very much controlled, as both the Guardian Council and the supreme leader can block legislation that is passed by the Majlis. There are only 3 institutions within the national government of Iran in which popular elections are held, that for the Assembly of Religious Experts, the Majlis, and the presidency. Iran is one of few countries that utilizes a runoff or 2-round election system for their presidency. This would occur if no one candidate received a majority of the votes in the first round. The top 2 vote-getters would move on to a second round to determine the winner. Iran does give off the appearance of having a well-established democracy, since there's not a long-established history of reported fraudulent elections, at least not on a comparative scale. However, it is still important to remember that these elections are still heavily controlled by the powerful Guardian Council. Iran is of course a country that is heavily dependent on the export of oil for its economy to thrive. Iran is the second most important member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, after Saudi Arabia, and thus it is a key player in determining the global prices for oil. After the death of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989, leaders at the top of the Iranian state realized that economic development would be very important to sustaining the state into the future. Unlike in Nigeria, however, Revenues from oil have created a stronger, more urbanized and industrialized society in Iran, as most levels of the country have actually seen the quality of life improve because of oil revenues. They today enjoy higher literacy rates, improved infrastructure, an increased presence of automobiles, and an improving healthcare system. However, the dependency on oil still makes their economy very vulnerable to global shifts in demand. Slow integration of privatization is occurring, but it is again very slow, as over 70% of economic sectors today are still under state control. Another factor that has complicated economic development in Iran in recent years has been economic sanctions imposed by the West, particularly by the United States, as a form of protest for the Iranian nuclear program, in which they have tried to bulk up over the last several years. While income gaps do still exist, Iran is now a mid-level country in terms of where it stands on the Gini coefficient index. Cleavages and division within Iran today is mostly based on class, with the middle class ranking of mostly younger citizens who were born after the revolution and do not feel the same devout allegiance to the religious clerics and leaders at the top of the state. Thus, young people and college students today are the most likely to rebel against the establishments of the Guardian Council and other clerical agencies. Factory workers and women's rights groups are also stemming up in many places within the country. Women are making small gains in terms of the educational and career arenas, but they are still relegated in many places to more traditional family roles and are expected to be subservient to men, particularly their fathers and husbands, in most aspects of society. Birth control, however, has been permitted in recent years under the Iranian constitution, but mainly as a means of population control. Perhaps some of the harshest treatment towards women in Iran today really stems to their legal code, that of Islamic law or Sharia law, in which punishments of stoning and drowning are still prevalent in many aspects of society with certain types of convictions. The judiciary system in Iran is still heavily controlled by the religious leaders, including the Assembly of Religious Experts and the Supreme Leader, as the judiciary is skewed and asked to interpret laws in ways that are consistent with extreme Shia Muslim beliefs. The Iranian military is also heavily under the jurisdiction of the religious leaders, as the Supreme Leader is, of course, the Commander-in-Chief. Political culture in Iran today is best characterized between the divisions between older conservatives and younger reformists, who disagree over a variety of issues, but mainly over the role that Islam should play in the state, as well as how much of a role the government should play in economic development and expansion. Iranians identify themselves more with the individual political factions or sects that they are a part of, and as conservatives or reformists, much more so than they identify themselves with individual political parties. While political parties do exist and are organized formally, each of them must register with the Ministry of the Interior in order to make sure that any of the candidates who establish themselves with these parties are consistent with Shia Muslim beliefs. For the free response section, the first question will ask you to take a look at how oil has been both a blessing and a curse for Iran, as large pools of oil revenues have brought much wealth and improvement to Iranian culture, but has also made them very vulnerable. In question 2, you're going to look at the balance between theocracy and democracy that exists within the country today. And finally, in the concept-based question, you're going to draw some comparisons between unitary systems and federal systems and different ways that governments centralize or decentralize power.